We join our story back as Ash and Zoe sit finishing some food, having managed to traverse the path through Mount Coronet faster than they had expected, thanks to Zoe's knowledge of the mountain passages. Now using this downtime to rest and get a little bit of light training in, as Ash turns to his team asking if they are ready to train, all but Alekid let out an excited cheer, with the electric type walking away from its trainer. Ash sighs at this, having been having problems with Alekid since the battle with Gardenia. The plug Pokemon seemingly wants nothing to do with him or his team. Ash has tried all he can to figure out why, but Alekid is keeping its distance. The only time Ash sees Alekid is when the Pokemon eats, but even then, once it's finished eating, Alekid walks away from its trainer, leaving his line of sight and only returning when Ash calls it back. The Pokemon often coming back slowly, and weirdly so, calling itself before Ash can ask any questions, with today looking like it's going to go the same way. However, Ash's Pokemon have sensed how much this has been affecting their trainer, none more than Riolu, who, this time, instead of letting Alekid walks away, shouts out, asking Alekid if it's too afraid to lose again to train with them. Alekid turns its head back to look Riolu in the eyes, snarling out in frustration. Alekid walks back, getting in Riolu's face, growling as if asking for Riolu to repeat that. Ash goes to break this fight up, but decides to play into it, asking Alekid if he wants to have a practice battle against Riolu. Both Pokemon nod as Ash lets out a small cheer. He begins to arrange the battle into a double, so hopefully Aleki can learn to play nice alongside Muffin, or maybe even Gligar. Ash quickly taking this chance to take Riolu's arm brace off, an item he brought after Eterna City Nurse Joy said it would help Riolu's healing process, and to also make sure that the Emanation Pokemon is okay with doing this. Once getting a confirmation that it is, Zoe takes a stance as the referee, as a double battle between Alekid and Muffin versus Gligar and Riolu begins. Alekid acts first, and without orders, using Quick Attack to race forward. Ash shouts out for his starter, telling him to please wait a second, while Riolu welcomes the challenge of the second strongest Pokemon on its trainer's team. As Alekid closes the distance between himself and Riolu in a mere second thanks to Quick Attack, Ash can tell Alekid's moving faster than normal, and unlike normal, instead of using a normal shoulder slam, the Mon goes to throw a punch into Riolu. However, Riolu, acting on instinct, grabs Alekid by the arm, rolls onto its back, and flings Alekid into a nearby river, using a new move in Circle Throw. As Alekid soars through the air, it can do little to delay its impact with the nearby water. Ash, moving without thought, races towards the river, jumping with all of his might to grab his starter Pokemon, just inches before his back breaks the surface of the water. But this sudden appearance of the two unknown creatures awakens a creature at the bottom of the lake, with Ash and Alekid being sent flying out only a few seconds after landing in it. The pair landing on the riverbank, hard, both let out a pained yell before turning to see a Feebas flailing above the water where they once was. Ash is impressed at the power of this Pokemon. Ash turns to make sure his friend is okay, but Alekid does little but let out a growl of its name before charging up a shockwave and sending it across the river. Zoe, watching from the side, can't help but be amazed at the beauty of the lightning being reflected off the surface of the water. However, she cannot enjoy this sight for long, as soon the lightning finds its mark, flash frying Feebas within seconds. Kid lets out a small cheer, reminiscent of how Ash used to see. However, the trainer misses this, as he throws forward a Pokeball, capturing the Pokemon which he had just learned through his Pokédex has a unique evolution. This sight makes Alekid growl out once more, as before the capture is even finished, the electric type walks away to be alone. He turns to thank his starter, really happy he got his help, but he turns to see that Alekid has long since left. Ash, picking his hat up, bites it in frustration, as Zoe and the rest of his team come to check on him. Trying to hide his frustration, Ash smiles, and praises Riolu for learning a new move, before asking it to be careful where it throws Alekid in the future. The Emanation Pokemon gives a small nod, and thanks to Ash having taken so much time to care for Riolu, and even joining in some basic workouts to make sure that Riolu's taking its training gently, you can tell by the look in Riolu's eyes that it will at least try to be more careful. Happy with this answer and not wanting to dwell on whatever is going on with Alekid, the Cantonian trainer takes to meeting his newest capture, bringing it out of its ball and singing its praise for how powerful it is, causing the small flush of red to run across the Feebas's scaly face. Ash then spends the next few minutes introducing his newest capture to his team, a challenging task made harder as after Ash praises Feebas more, the Pokemon seemingly only wants to cuddle into him. After fully introducing Feebas to the rest of his team, Ash decides to call off the training today, packing up their campsite, returning everyone, and calling back Alekid, who does come back and recalls itself, as the pair then make their way to Hearthome City in hopes for both to be able to achieve their goals of collecting a new badge and a new ribbon. Unluckily for our heroes, Ash is informed that the gym leader is out of town, having lost a battle recently which inspired her to go and improve. Ash is bummed but has no choice but to accept this, making sure that he plans a return to this city so he can get that battle. As for Zoe, the young coordinator is just as unlucky, as she finds herself missing out on the registration for the contest by only a few hours. Both bummed they missed out on a chance of acquiring a new badge and a ribbon respectively, decide to take this chance to chill out and actually enjoy a contest for a change, with Ash and Zoe sitting in and watching the Hearthome City contest. Zoe, for the first time, truly getting an understanding of what the audience experiences when watching a contest. It is here that Zoe comes face to face with an older looking woman called Lilia, who uses her Delcatty to clear her way through the competition in no time, soon being crowned the victor of this Hearthome City contest. Watching the older woman move and how she commanded her Delcatty inspires Zoe, lights a fire under her so strong that she knows she's going to give it all she's got in her next contest. As the pair watch Lilia walk away with the victory, Ash and Zoe decide to get to walking themselves, as with no gym battle or contest possible, they decide to get their Pokemon checked out and plan out the next leg of their journey. Once getting the all clear that their Pokemon are all good to go, and Ash even being informed that within a week or two's time, Riolu's arm should be good enough that it will be valid to participate in any major battle, Ash hearing this celebrates with Riolu, as the pair head off to Route 209, their sights set on Stellacion Town, the home of Zoe's next contest. As the pair make their way down Route 209, they use this time to train and grow as strong as they can in preparation for their upcoming challenges, Ash trying his hardest to rekindle his bond with Alekid, all while juggling his training with the rest of his team. And while he is finding fruits in training with the rest of his squad, he makes barely any headway in training with Alekid, the Pokemon often coming out of its ball, refusing to train alongside its teammates, and Ash and it arguing before Alekid eventually walks off a few seconds later. However, Alekid isn't the only thing Ash was worried about. As the group finish setting up their campsite on the first night of their trip down 209, Riolu gets weirdly broody. Pokemon doesn't join in on the playing which the rest of the Pokemon are doing. Instead, it just sits on the edge of the campsite, scanning the horizon as if looking for something. Ash is confused by this, as he's worried Riolu is going to stop training with the others, or he's had a falling out with them, and this fear that Riolu will soon stop listening to him creeps in, paralysing the boy for a moment. This anxiety sneaks up on Ash, paralysing him. Gligar's prankster nature calms him. Seeing his friend brooding like a weirdo, Gligar sneaks up on Riolu, who any other day would notice him, but right now is easy prey for the Fly Scorpion to pinch the back of the neck of and then fly off laughing. Riolu is confused for a second before giving chase, barking out its own name in annoyance, telling Gligar to get back here. As the pair begin to laugh, Ash lets out a relieved sigh. His worry is almost instantly washed away. His worry is being quelled even more, as later on when Ash goes to train, Riolu is still happy to train alongside the rest of the party. And thanks to this, the group continue moving forward and training together. And it's one day in the midst of training that Ash spots a familiar lavender-haired boy walking down the road, hands deeply placed in his pockets. Ash excitedly calls out to his friend. The sound of Ash's voice makes the Sinnonian trainer turn his head. However, Ash's smile isn't returned. Instead, an almost crazed look fills the other trainer's eyes, as walking forward, skipping all formalities, Paul coldly demands a 6-on-6 battle, now. Ash stammers for a second, confused, a bit caught off guard at how brash Paul is, but being excited for a rematch, he nods his head, before remembering he only has 5 Pokemon. At saying this, Paul's eyes narrow, as if angered, but taking a second, the trainer seemingly seething with anger, as his eyes scan through the team of Ashes, which all stand around the trainer's feet. He changes his demand to a 3v3, thinking that it will at least provide good practice for the gym battles of this region. Ash wants to take a second to talk to Paul, but looking into the trainer's eyes, something's clearly wrong. This isn't the same trainer he battled at the beginning of his journey. He remembers something Oak had said to him, about learning more about someone through the heat of battle than through any conversation. So Ash solemnly nods his head, as Zoe, confused at how things evolved so fast, takes a stand as a temporary referee for both trainers. As Paul throws forward his first Pokeball with a cry of "Grottle, stand by for battle," As the Terrarian turtle lands, Ash is excited to learn this is the evolution of Turtwig. After a quick scan of the decks and learning this is the evolution of Turtwig, he shouts out pride to Paul, telling him he's done a good job at getting his Turtwig to evolve already. This praise seemingly brings a small smile to Paul's lips before he forces it away. Ash, taking into account the typing of Grottle, goes to call for Moffin, but when Elekid jumps onto the battlefield, eager for a fight, Ash wants to call for Elekid to get off, but thinks this could be another good chance to try and rekindle his friendship with Elekid, going back through their first battle together, again. So he shouts out for Elekid to give it everything it's got, a command which gets Elekid's eyes to roll, before staring down his first victory and giving a cocky grin, taunting the turtle to come on. Both trainer and Pokemon snarl at the electric type as Paul orders a reflect, a plane of glass appearing and then disappearing. Ash calls for a charge to build up some power, however Elekid instead uses quick attack, darting forward and throwing a punch towards Grottle, as it had done with Riolu. However, as the punch collides with Grottle's face, the reflect nullifies the blow. Ash doesn't understand what Elekid is doing, shouting out for it to just listen to him, but the Pokemon doesn't respond, instead throwing another punch at the Pokemon, which once again is useless into Grottle's reflect. Paul, watching this, feels a swell of disappointment before calling Grottle to use Leech Seed, putting the battle on a timer. As the jolts of pain echo throughout Elekid's body as the Leech Seed saps away some of its strength. The Plug Pokemon looks at its opponent. Ash shouts out for his partner, wanting to know if it's okay, but Elekid does nothing but shout out his own name and throw another punch into the reflect. Once more the attack is weakened by reflect. However, Paul can't help but notice this attack forces Grottle to grunt. Knowing the reflect has a few moments left active, he doesn't know what Elekid is doing and he doesn't want to find out, so he decides to end this battle now. Paul shouts for Grottle to use Bulldoze. Grottle suddenly leaps forward, closing the few feet between each Pokemon to slam its larger frame into Elekid. Elekid is sent coursing back only a few feet away from Ash, falling to the ground. Ash wants to go help Elekid find its feet, however, the electric-type Pokemon pushes itself to them and suddenly fires off a shockwave which strikes into Grottle's body, causing the Pokemon to scream out in pain for only a second, as finally another chip of Leech Seed drains away whatever energy Elekid had left. Ash finally closes the distance between himself and Elekid, picking his starter Pokemon up and holding it in his arms for a second. That's when he feels just how cold Elekid is. Even after such a powerful shockwave, the Pokemon should be hot, right? Why is Elekid so cold, especially his hands? Before Ash can think about it anymore, as he begins to recall Elekid, a tut from Paul grabs Ash's attention. As the trainers lock eyes, Paul orders Ash to bring out his next Pokemon. Ash grinds his teeth, no clue why Paul is being so cold, not even a compliment to whatever was going on with Elekid, or even asking why Elekid wasn't listening to him. This is certainly not the same trainer he met at the start of his journey. However, knowing more will be revealed through battle, Ash calls for his next Pokemon in Gligar, the Fly Scorpion coming out and taking to the sky with a gust of wind. Ash watches to see what Paul does, however Paul just sits watching, not paying any mind to the state of Grottle, so taking the charge, Ash calls for a wing attack, as Gligar rides the winds down, slamming its wing into the face of Grottle before the wind takes Gligar airborne with a bit of luck. As the Fly Scorpion hovers in the air for a few moments, Paul sits watching. Ash, wanting to turn the battle back into a 2v2, calls for another wing attack. However, Paul just smiles, telling Grottle to challenge the attack with a Bulldoze. The two attacks collide for a second, and Gligar takes no damage from the exchange while Grottle does, but the brief explosion of force that the attacks created when colliding causes the gust of wind Gligar had been riding on to dissipate, and now Gligar is stuck on the ground right next to Grottle. Grottle takes this time to set up a new reflect before Paul recalls his starter, saying nothing to Grottle before calling out his next Pokemon, saying Chimchar, stand by for battle. The fiery simian comes out of the ball with a small cheer and dance. However, Paul shouts for Chimchar to cut it out, stopping the Pokemon's happy dance and turning its attention towards its opponent. Paul, not wanting to give Gligar a chance to find a new gust of wind to ride on, orders Chimchar to use Flame Wheel. As the monkey rockets forward towards Gligar, knocking it back before it can ever find a new wind, much like Paul had hoped. Ash calls for Gligar, but the Pokemon, showing its strength, is back on its feet before Ash can finish his cry. Better yet, Gligar has found a new breeze to ride on, allowing for it to take to the air once more. Ash grins at this. With Gligar airborne, he orders for a barrage of mud shots. Gligar grins as from the sky above, a downpour of mud bullets rains atop of Chimchar, making the Sinnoh start to cry out in pain. However, Paul does not give an order, telling Chimchar to open its arms and take the attacks. Weakly, the Pokemon does so. Ash is confused, hesitating, but Paul watches the battle, wondering if it's going to happen. And from this hesitation from Ash and this confidence from Paul, an answer is provided as suddenly a ruby red aura glows around Chimchar. Its pupils dilate until they're basically non-existent, and its tail flame grows twice in size. As this happens, Ash feels a paw pulling on his leg. As looking down, he spots Riolu, having taken a stand next to its trainer, eyes glowing blue, staring at Chimchar. A word pings in Ash's mind, a faint voice calling out. It's saying, I want to fight. Ash is confused, but he also doesn't get a chance to understand, as suddenly Chimchar lets out a scream of rage, and he's drawn back to the battle. It doesn't take long for Ash to figure out that this is Blaze. He's trained enough Charmanders to be familiar with the ability, but he can see that this Blaze is different from every other one he's ever seen. This is strong. This is next level. Paul, seeing Ash break this all down in his head, goes to make an order. However, the words can't leave his lips before an Ember attack is launched from Chimchar's mouth, the attack being strong enough that Ash would almost call it a flamethrower. Gligar can do little to dodge the attack as soon he is engulfed in flames and brought crashing down to earth. Gligar, once more showing its strength, stands to its feet. However, the Ember attack has damaged its wings enough to prevent flight for the remainder of this battle. Ash wants to call this round in favour of Paul, however without a command being given, Chimchar screams like a crazed animal, racing forward with a flame wheel, Gligar narrowly dodging the attack by jumping out of the way. Zoe, being the active ref, tells Paul to call off Chimchar, but the boy just smiles and remarks, asking why should he? After all, she didn't stop Elekid when it wasn't listening to ask. With his face so full of smugness, Zoe wants to punch him right now, but now chewing the inside of her mouth with rage, thinking how she shouldn't have given Ash that chance. She trusts him because he's her friend, and she wanted to give him that one chance to try and bond with Elekid, but now she has to put all of her faith in Ash to try and end this battle before Chimchar gets out of control. With Chimchar, thanks to the aid of Flame Wheel, closing the distance between itself and Gligar, Ash can only command for the Fly Scorpion Pokemon to dodge out of the way, with Gligar narrowly managing to do so, while also striking back with a small hit with Poison Sting, using its tail. As Chimchar, using Flame Wheel, rolls away and stops before staring daggers at Gligar, Ash knows he needs to wrap this battle up, and that if Blaze is active, one more good hit should finish this fight. Ash asks if Gligar can finish this battle for him. The Mon nods before turning back to Chimchar. The ape lets loose another rage-filled scream, which makes Ash and his Pokemon's heart skip a beat. This primal scream is followed by another Flame Wheel. Gligar once again dodges the attack by jumping over the Flame Wheel, flipping forward and bringing its tail down with a powerful display of its new move, Poison Tail. As Poison Tail and Flame Wheel clash, soon an eruption of purple and red erupts from both Pokemon, sending them flying. Chimchar landing at the feet of Paul, while Gligar lands at Ash's feet. Ash calls out for Gligar, but the spirals in its eyes indicates its inability to battle. Paul grins, watching as Chimchar slowly pulls itself to its feet, the Pokemon letting out another roar as its flames erupt, growing twice more once again. Zoe reluctantly calls Paul the victor of this round, as Ash is told to produce a new Pokemon. Ash hesitates for a second, but a second is too long for Chimchar, and he isn't giving Ash any longer. Soon the Pokemon spins into a flame wheel once again, this time aimed straight at Riolu by Ash's feet. Riolu, seeing this, takes a fighting stance, ready to circle throw Chimchar into a nearby pond, but the creature in that pond acts first, as suddenly the flame wheel is halted by a tackle attack from Feebas. With Feebas hitting Chimchar out of nowhere, it manages to disrupt the power of the flame wheel, even if it ends up taking a small bit of damage from the attack. As the enraged ape screams out in anger, Ash thanks Feebas, asking if it wants to fight. The Pokemon chirps out, wanting to earn the same praise Gligar had gotten from its trainer, even if it is literally a fish out of water. Riolu grips onto Ash's trousers harder. The Pokemon annoyed it couldn't battle this Chimchar, but Ash can't think on that anymore, as without an order Chimchar uses Dig, disappearing from sight. Ash waits until he can see the ground beneath Feebas shaking, and calls for a splash, telling Feebas to use all of its power and jump in the air as high as it can. Feebas, smacking its tail into the ground, manages to avoid the incoming Dig by going airborne. The following Ember, Feebas is unable to avoid, as it soon, for the second time within 2 weeks, fried while it's airborne. However, unlike last time, even through the insane power of this blaze and this evolving ember, Feebas clings to consciousness. Ash, cheering out that Feebas is the best, orders for a flail. As Feebas begins falling, it slams its tail into the head of Chimchar, knocking the fire type back down to the ground. Ash hopes that this will have won him the battle, but as soon as Feebas falls to the ground, he can see its eyes turn to spirals, making Paul the victor. And worst of all, Chimchar is still conscious. The ape Pokemon slowly starting to pull itself to its feet, but it clearly has no fuel left in the tank. Paul, seeing a chance to tame the beast, recalls Chimchar with a smile, before Ash can run forward, thanking Feebas, who cuddles into its trainer's arms apologetically. Ash looks up to Paul to see the trainer having a sour look on his face while looking at the Pokeball, as if he wanted to lose this fight. But before he can say anything, Paul, looking at Chimchar's Pokeball, calls it sloppy for letting that pathetic Pokemon land a blow. Zoe and Ash shout out that he was being reckless with Chimchar, and whatever that blaze is clearly beyond his control. Paul, not looking towards Zoe, stares at Ash, telling him that he's wrong. Blaze is perfectly within his control, and as far as he can tell, Ash is being too soft and sweet to his Pokemon, and that's only making them weak, and this battle proves that. Ash goes to shout, but before he can get a word out, Paul turns on his heels, telling him that power isn't built on friendship. It's forged through discipline. Stop coddling your Pokemon, and maybe they'll start listening. So he tells Paul to not be a jerk, while Paul shares nothing more than a small glance towards her before walking away. Ash tries to find words, but can't find them, being left in total silence as all he can do is watch his Sinnoh Region rival walk away.